Welcome back. This is the third video in Leviticus out of 5. Leviticus 11. Clean and unclean foods. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, from among all the land animals, these are the creatures that you may eat. Any animal that has divided hooves and is cleft-footed and chews the cud, such you may eat. But among those that chew the cud or have divided hooves, you shall not eat the following: the camel, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hoofs. It is unclean for you. The rock badger, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hooves. It is unclean for you. The hare, for even though it chews the cud, it does not have divided hooves. It is unclean for you. The pig, for even though it has divided hooves and is cleft-footed, it does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcass you shall not touch. They are unclean for you. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. Everything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the streams, such you may eat. But anything in the seas or the streams that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters, and among all the other living creatures that are in the waters, they are detestable to you, and detestable they shall remain. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall regard as detestable. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. These you shall regard as detestable among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination: the eagle, the vulture, the osprey, the buzzard, the kite of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the water hen, the desert owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that walk upon all fours are detestable to you. But among the winged insects that walk on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust according to its kind, the bald locust according to its kind, the cricket according to its kind, and the grasshopper according to its kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. Unclean animals. By these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries any part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that has divided hoofs, but is not cleft-footed or does not chew the cud, is unclean for you. Everyone who touches one of them shall be unclean. All that walk on their paws among the animals that walk on all fours are unclean for you. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until the evening. And the one who carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean for you. These are unclean for you among the creatures that swarm upon the earth: the weasel, the mouse, the great lizard according to its kind, the gecko, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean for you among all that swarm. Whoever touches one of them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything upon which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether an article of wood or cloth or skin or sacking, any article that is used for any purpose, it shall be dipped into water, and that shall be unclean until the evening. And then it shall be unclean, and then it shall be clean. If any of them falls into any earthen vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean and shall break the vessel. Any food that shall be eaten shall be unclean if water from any such vessel comes upon it. And any liquid that shall be drunk shall be unclean if it was in any such vessel. Everything on which any part of the carcass falls shall be unclean, whether in oven or stove, it shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. but a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, while whatever touches the carcass in it shall be unclean. If any part of the carcass falls upon any seed set aside for sowing, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and any part of the carcass falls on it, it is unclean for you. So only if the seed is moistened, if it touches the carcass, then it's unclean. If an animal of which you may eat dies, anyone who touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening. Those who eat of its carcass shall wash their clothes and be unclean until the evening. And those who carry the carcass shall wash their clothes and be unclean until the evening. All creatures that swarm upon the earth are detestable. All creatures that swarm upon the earth are detestable. They shall not be eaten. Whatever moves on its belly, and whatever moves on all fours, or whatever has many feet, all the creatures that swarm upon the earth you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any creature that swarms. You shall not defile yourselves with them, and so become unclean. For I am the Lord your God. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming creature that moves on the earth. For I am the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be holy, for I am holy. This is the law pertaining to land, animal, and bird, and every living creature that moves through the waters, and every creature that swarms upon the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that may not be eaten. Leviticus 12, purification of woman after childbirth. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, If a woman conceives and bears a male child, she shall be ceremonially unclean 7 days, as at the time of her menstruation she shall be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Her time of blood purification shall be 33 days. She shall not touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are completed. If she bears a female child, she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation. Her time of blood purification shall be 66 days. When the days of her purification are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. He shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement on her behalf, and she shall be clean from her flow of blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, male or female. If she cannot afford a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement on her behalf, and she shall be clean. Leviticus 13. Leprosy, varieties, and symptoms. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When a person has on the skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a leprous disease on the skin of his body, he shall be brought to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests. Shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests. The priest shall examine the disease on the skin of his body, and if the hair on the diseased area has turned white, and his disease appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous disease. After the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. If the spot is white in the skin of his body and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair on it has not turned white, the priest shall confine the diseased person for 7 days. The priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if he sees the disease is checked and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall confine him 7 days more. The priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the disease has abated and the disease is not spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the eruption spreads in the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again before the priest. The priest shall make an examination, and if the eruption is spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprous. It is a leprous disease. When a person contracts a leprous disease, he shall be brought to the priest. The priest shall make an examination, and if there is a white swelling in the skin that has turned the hair white, and there is quick raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic leprous disease in the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not confine him, for he is unclean. But if the disease breaks out in the skin, so that it covers all the skin of the diseased person from head to foot, so far as the priest can see, then the priest shall make an examination, and if the disease has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean of the disease, since it is all turned white, he is clean. But if raw flesh ever appears on him, he shall be unclean. The priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. Raw flesh is unclean, but for it is a leprous disease. But if the raw flesh again turns white, he shall come to the priest. The priest shall examine him, and if the disease is turned white, the priest shall pronounce the diseased person clean. He is clean. So the Lord was afflicting people who were doing things that they should not be doing, and committing sins and getting punished. So people who were getting punished had to come to Aaron to get atonement, and to see that they had these leprous diseases that were being inflicted on them because they were sinning. When there is on the skin of one's body a boil that has healed, and in the place of the boil there appears a white swelling or a reddish white spot, it shall be shown to the priest. The priest shall make an examination, and if it appears deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease broken out in the boil. But if the priest examines it and the hair on it is not white, nor is it deeper than the skin but has abated, the priest shall confine him 7 days. If it spreads in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is diseased. But if the spot remains in one place and does not spread, it is the scar of the boil. The priest shall pronounce him clean. Or when the body has a burn on the skin and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a spot, reddish white or white, the priest shall examine it. If the hair in the spot has turned white and it appears deeper than the skin, it is a leprous disease. It has broken out in the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease. But if the priest examines it and the hair on the spot is not white, and it is no deeper than the skin but has abated, the priest shall confine him 7 days. The priest shall examine him the 7th day. If it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease. But if the spot remains in one place and does not spread in the skin but has abated, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burn. When the man or woman has a disease on the head or in the beard, the priest shall examine the disease. So I just want you to notice this is stuff that's happening to people because of what they're doing. Their behavior, their stiff-necked behavior, it affects their relationships, and it affects the things that they're doing. So they're being afflicted as a discipline as a result of the things that they're doing. And so that's why these people are dealing with this kind of stuff. A man or woman has a disease on their head or in their beard, the priest shall examine the disease. If it appears deeper than the skin and the hair on it is yellow and thin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. And I imagine it was so frustrating being unclean from some stuff you did, because now you can make other people unclean. So you get isolated, you get put out of the camp, because you're doing stuff, and you get afflicted and you get put out of the camp because you're unclean. Nobody else wants to be unclean with you. It is an itch, a leprous disease of the head or the beard. If the priest examines the itching disease and it appears no deeper than the skin and there's no black hair on it, in it, the priest shall confine the person with the itching disease for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the itch. If the itch has not spread and there's no yellow hair in it, when the itch appears to be no deeper, the itch appears to be no deeper than the skin, he shall shave, but the itch he shall not shave. The priest shall confine the person with the itch for 7 days more. On the seventh day, the priest shall examine the itch. If the itch is not spread in the skin and it appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the itch spreads in the skin after he was pronounced clean, the priest shall examine him. If the itch is spread in the skin, the priest need not seek for the yellow hair. He is unclean. But if in his eyes the itch is checked and black hair is grown in it, the itch is healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When a man or woman has spots in the skin of the body, white spots, the priest shall make an examination, and if the spots in the skin of the body are of a dull white, it is a rash that has broken out on the skin. He is clean. If anyone loses the hair from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. If he loses if he loses the hair from his forehead and temples, he has baldness of the forehead, but he is clean. But if there is on the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white disease spot, it is a leprous disease breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. The priest shall examine him. If the disease swelling is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, which resembles a leprous disease in the skin of the body, he is leprous. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. The disease is on his head. The person who has the leprous disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head be disheveled, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. How humiliating is this? This is a punishment. This is a discipline for people who are acting up. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Concerning clothing, man, he says, person who has the leprous disease shall wear torn clothes. And they have to lament the fact that they have a leprous disease, because what they did caused it. Whatever it was that they did, they sinned and caused that leprous disease. Concerning clothing, when a leprous disease appears in it, in woolen or linen cloth, in warp or woof of linen or wool, or in a skin, or in anything made of skin, if the disease shows greenish or reddish in the garment, whether in warp or woof, or in skin, or in anything made of skin, it is a leprous disease and shall be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the disease and put the diseased article aside for 7 days. He shall examine the disease on the seventh day. If the disease has spread in the cloth, in warp or woof, or in the skin, whatever be the use of the skin, this is a spreading leprous disease. It is unclean. He shall burn the clothing, whether diseased, in warp or woof, woolen or linen, or anything of skin, for it is a spreading leprous disease. It shall be burned in fire. If the priest makes an examination and the disease is not spread in the clothing, in warp or woof, or in anything of skin, the priest shall command them to wash the article in which the disease appears, and he shall put it aside 7 days more. The priest shall examine the diseased article after it has been washed. If the diseased spot has not changed color, though the disease has not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in fire, whether the leprous spot is on the inside or on the outside. If the priest makes an examination and the disease has abated after it is washed, he shall tear the spot out of the cloth in warp or woof, or out of the skin. If it appears again in the garment in warp or woof, or in anything of skin, it is spreading. Shall burn with fire that in which the disease appears. If the cloth, warp or woof, or anything of skin from which the disease disappears, when you have washed it, shall be washed a second time, and it shall be clean. This is the ritual for a leprous disease in a cloth of wool or linen, either in warp or woof, or in anything of skin, to decide whether it is clean or unclean. Leviticus 14. Purification of lepers and leprous houses. Your house can become leprous. Your house can become leprous. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the ritual for the leprous person at the time of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest. The priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall make an examination. If the disease is healed in the leprous person, the priest shall command that 2 living clean birds and cedar wood and crimson yarn and hyssop be brought for the one who is to be cleansed. The priest shall command that one of the birds be slaughtered over fresh water in an earthen vessel. He shall take the living bird with the cedar wood and the crimson yarn and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. He shall sprinkle it 7 times upon the one who is to be cleansed of the leprous disease. Then he shall pronounce him clean, and he shall let the living bird go into the open field. The one who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes and shave off all his hair and bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean. It's just so, the thought is just so humiliating. It had to be so humiliating for these people to be messing up like this and then have to shave off all their hair and stuff. You know, this was indeed, I feel, a punishment. This was discipline for the behaviors that they were showing. After that, he shall come into the camp, but shall live outside his tent 7 days, so other people can see him. So other people can see him living outside his tent with his hair shaved and everything. On the 7th day, he shall shave all his hair, of head, beard, eyebrows. He shall shave all his hair. Then he shall wash his clothes and bathe in his body in water, and he shall be clean. I bet this happened all the time. On the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe lamb in the first year without blemish, and a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of choice flour mixed with oil, and 1 log of oil. The priest who cleanses shall set the person to be cleansed along with these things before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall take 1 of the lambs and offer it as a guilt offering, along with a log of oil, and raise them as an elevation offering before the Lord. He shall slaughter the lamb in the place where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered, in the holy place, for the guilt offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. The priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand, and dip his right finger in the oil that is on his left hand, and sprinkle some oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil that remains in his hand, the priest shall put on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand, he shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed. Then the priest shall make atonement on his behalf before the Lord. The priest shall offer the sin offering to make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanness. Afterward, he shall slaughter the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. Thus the priest shall make atonement on his behalf, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford so much, he shall take 1 male lamb for a guilt offering to be elevated, to make atonement on his behalf, and 1/10 of an ephah of choice flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, and a log of oil. Also 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, such as he can afford, 1 for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. On the 8th day, he shall bring them for his cleansing to the priest, to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord. And the priest shall take the lamb of the guilt offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall raise them as an elevation offering before the Lord. The priest shall slaughter the lamb of the guilt offering and take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, on the big toe of the right foot. The priest shall pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is on his left hand 7 times before the Lord. The priest shall put some of the oil that is in his hand on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot, where the blood of the guilt offering was placed. The rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, to make atonement on his behalf before the Lord. And he shall offer of the turtle doves or pigeons, such as he can afford, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, along with a grain offering. And the priest shall make atonement before the Lord on behalf of the one being cleansed. This is the ritual for the one who has a leprous disease, who cannot afford the offerings for his cleansing. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I give you for a possession, and I put a leprous disease in a house in the land of your possession, the owner of the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, there seems to me to be some sort of disease in my house. The priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes to examine the disease, or all that is in the house will become unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to inspect the house. He shall examine the disease. If the disease is in the walls of the house with greenish or reddish spots, and if it appears to be deeper than the surface, the priest shall go outside of the door of the house and shut up the house for 7 days. The priest shall come again on the 7th day and make an inspection. If the disease is spread in the walls of the house, the priest shall command that the stones in which the disease appears to be taken out and thrown into an unclean place outside the city. He shall have the inside of the house scraped thoroughly, and the plaster that is scraped off shall be dumped in an unclean place outside the city. They shall take other stones and put them in place of those stones, and take other plaster and plaster the house. If the disease breaks out again in the house after he has taken out the stones and scraped the house and plastered it, the priest shall go and make an inspection. If the disease is spread in the house, it is a spreading leprous disease in the house. It is unclean. You shall have the house torn down, its stones and timber, and all the plaster of the house, and taken outside the city to an unclean place. All who enter the house while it is shut up shall be unclean until the evening. And all who sleep in the house shall wash their clothes, and all who eat in the house shall wash their clothes. If the priest comes and makes an inspection, and the disease has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, the priest shall pronounce the house clean. The disease is healed. For the cleansing of the house, he shall take 2 birds with cedar wood and crimson yarn and hyssop, and shall slaughter one of the birds over fresh water in an earthen vessel, and shall take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the crimson yarn along with the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slaughtered bird in the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Thus he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with the fresh water, and with the living bird, and with the cedar wood and hyssop and crimson yarn. And he shall let the living bird go out of the city into the open field, so he shall make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the ritual for any leprous disease, for an itch, for leprous diseases in clothing and houses, and for a swelling or an eruption or a spot, to determine when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the ritual for leprous diseases. So here, like it said here about Canaan, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I give you for possession, and I put a leprous disease in a house in the land of your possession. So he's going to he's going to afflict whole houses in Canaan with leprous disease as a result of their iniquities. This is a result of iniquities. He's not just doing that. This is a response. It's a discipline. It's a discipline for something that they did. So Leviticus 15 is the last one for this set of chapters. With 2 more left. Concerning bodily discharges. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when a man has a discharge from his member, his discharge makes him ceremonially unclean. The uncleanness of his discharge is this: whether his member flows with his discharge or his member is stopped from discharging, it is uncleanness for him. Every bed on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. Anyone who touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. All who sit on anything on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. All who touch the body of the one with the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. If the one with the discharge spits on persons who are clean, then they shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Any saddle on which the one with the discharge rides shall be unclean. All who touch anything that was under him shall be unclean until the evening. And all who carry such a thing shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Okay. What if people don't even know he's unclean and they're in contact with him? All those whom the one with the discharge touches without his having rinsed his hands in water shall wash their clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. It wasn't that easy to draw water back then for a bath. Any earthen vessel that the one with the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. When the one with the discharge is cleansed of his discharge, he shall count 7 days for his cleansing. He shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in fresh water, and he shall be clean. On the 8th day, he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and come before the Lord to the entrance of the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. The priest shall offer them, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. See, so he committed a sin. He committed a sin. And as a result, he was afflicted by discharge from his member, or the inability to discharge from it, which means you probably can't masturbate or maybe you can't urinate, right? And the priest shall make atonement on his behalf before the Lord for his discharge. If a man has an emission of semen, so that's different from the discharge, right? So if a man masturbates and he has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in water and be unclean until the evening. Everything made of cloth or of skin on which the semen falls shall be washed with water and be unclean until the evening. So anything that makes contact with the semen has to be washed with water and it will be unclean until the evening. If a man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen, both of them shall bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. When a woman has a discharge of blood that is her regular discharge from her body, she shall be in her impurity for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until the evening. Everything upon which she lies during her impurity shall be unclean. Everything also upon which she sits shall be unclean. Whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Whoever touches anything upon which she sits shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Whether it is the bed or anything upon which she sits, when she touches it, he shall be unclean until the evening. It shall be unclean until the evening. If any man lies with her and her impurity falls on him, he shall be unclean 7 days. And every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her impurity, or if she has a discharge beyond the time of her impurity, all the days of the discharge she shall continue in uncleanness, as in the days of her impurity. She shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies during all the days of her discharge shall be treated as the bed of her impurity, and everything on which she sits shall be unclean, as in the uncleanness of her impurity. Whoever touches these things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. If she is cleansed of her discharge, she shall count 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. On the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the priest, to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement on her behalf before the Lord for her unclean discharge. Thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, so that they do not die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst. So this is prescribed just for these people because they were in the presence of the Lord. They had to take special extra care because they were in the presence of the Lord. Okay. And they had to do this to prevent themselves from dying by defiling his tabernacle. This is the ritual for those who have a discharge, for him who has an emission of semen, becoming unclean thereby, for her who is in the infirmity of her period, for anyone male or female who has a discharge, and for the man who lies with a woman who is unclean. So that's it for this set of chapters. And I will see you for the next set.